Echoes in the Walls, October 7, 1986. Vermont's autumn breeze was unlike any Sarah had ever felt. Crisp, slightly foreboding, yet tinged with the aroma of fallen leaves. It was supposed to be her new beginning. Away from the bustle of Boston, the hushed whispers of neighbors, and the haunting memories of a past she yearned to forget, Sarah sought refuge in the small, isolated town of Vermont. As she approached her newly purchased aged property, she felt a chill that wasn't from the cold. The house, towering and majestic, seemed almost out of place amidst the dense forestry that surrounded it. Its wooden panels, though decayed and time-worn, held stories of bygone eras. Most would be repelled by its dilapidated state, but to Sarah, it whispered promises of solitude and healing. However, as she inserted her key into the door's rusty lock and stepped onto the creaking floors, Sarah couldn't shake off an unsettling feeling. The vast emptiness of the house echoed back her footsteps, and the shadows seemed to dance with the little sunlight that peeped through the broken windows. It wasn't just the renovation project ahead that weighed on her mind, but the weight of the house's history and the stories it might tell. As days turned into weeks, Sarah began to uncover the layers of the old house. Each room held its own mysteries: faded wallpapers, antique furniture covered in dust, and creaky floorboards that groaned under her weight. But it was during her exploration of the study that she stumbled upon something truly intriguing. Hidden in a recess behind a loose wooden panel was an old leather-bound journal. Its pages, yellowed with age, bore the delicate handwriting of a woman named Clara. The initial entries spoke of mundane things: recipes, day-to-day chores, and the palpable joy of newlywed life with her husband, Samuel. But as Sarah delved deeper, the journal's tone shifted dramatically. Clara's writings grew frenzied and anxious. She wrote of strange occurrences, the feeling of being watched when alone, muffled whispers from behind walls in the dead of night, and of footsteps that seemed to come from nowhere. Clara's entries conveyed an increasing sense of paranoia and fear, as though she were trapped in a nightmare she couldn't escape. Sarah sat back, her heart pounding. Initially, she had dismissed the odd noises she herself had heard as mere quirks of an old house settling into its bones. But Clara's words painted a different picture. Was it possible that the echoes of the past still resonated within these walls? And if so, what other secrets did this house hold? She felt a mix of trepidation and curiosity, knowing that delving further might unearth truths darker than she could imagine. Nights in the old house grew longer and more restless for Sarah. The stories penned by Clara seemed to come alive, with every shadow and sound. The murmurs she'd previously dismissed became distinct whispers, though she could never make out the words. The floorboards creaked as if someone were pacing the halls, just beyond her line of sight. One evening, as Sarah was settling into bed, a soft thud echoed from the room above, the same room Clara had once called her sanctuary. Sarah froze, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, heart racing. Gathering her courage, she decided to investigate. As she stepped into the hallway, the temperature seemed to drop, and the hallway light flickered eerily. Each step she took toward Clara's room was met with another, echoing back from the opposite direction. Sarah pushed open the door slowly, revealing a room untouched by time. Clara's belongings were still there: a brush with strands of hair, a faded photograph of a smiling couple, and a mirror that seemed to reflect the room with a slightly distorted hue. The air was thick, and Sarah could feel the weight of memories pressing down on her. Suddenly, the whispers grew louder, culminating into a desperate cry that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Sarah, overwhelmed, fled the room, slamming the door behind her. She spent the night huddled in her bed, lights blazing, as memories of her own trauma intertwined with the eerie echoes of Clara's past. As dawn broke, Sarah was left grappling with a chilling realization. The house wasn't just a structure of bricks and wood, it was a living testament to its history. And whether she liked it or not, Sarah was now intertwined with its haunting narrative. Sarah decided to immerse herself in the community, hoping to find some insight into the mysteries of her home. A quaint town with barely a few thousand residents, it wasn't long before she was directed to Mrs. Adler, the oldest living resident and a fount of local tales. Inviting Sarah into her vintage home, Mrs. Adler poured steaming cups of chamomile tea. With a gaze that held countless stories, she began to unravel the tapestry of the town's history. The house Sarah had purchased was, unsurprisingly, at the center of the most whispered-about legend. Clara and Samuel, Mrs. Adler began, her voice raspy yet clear, were the epitome of young love. But love, my dear, has many facets. Over time, rumors of Clara's affair with a passing traveler began to circulate. The town was abuzz with whispers, but what happened next was what cemented the legend. One fateful night, following a heated altercation overheard by neighbors, Clara disappeared. Samuel claimed she had run away, unable to face the shame of her indiscretions. Yet, many in town believed a far more sinister tale, that in a fit of rage, Samuel had bricked up his wife alive within the walls of the house. Despite searches, Clara's body was never found, and Samuel, consumed by guilt or perhaps fear, vanished soon after. Sarah felt a shiver down her spine. Mrs. Adler leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Some nights, they say, you can still hear Clara's lament from the walls, calling out to anyone who'll listen. As Sarah left, the weight of the house's dark lore heavy on her shoulders, she couldn't shake off the feeling that she was now a part of a story that had yet to find its end. Days blurred into nights as Sarah's fixation on Clara's fate grew. Every creak, every whisper became a plea from the past, urging her to uncover the truth. Her home transformed from a sanctuary to an intricate puzzle. Every room a piece of a haunting jigsaw. Neighbors started to talk, whispering about the city girl who'd walk around her property at odd hours, ear pressed to the walls, listening intently. Lights in the house flickered at all hours as Sarah moved from room to room, meticulously documenting any anomaly. She started mapping out the house, marking areas where she heard noises more frequently. One afternoon, as Sarah was engrossed in an old photograph of Clara, she felt a gust of cold air, even though all the windows were shut. It led her to the basement, the one place she had avoided since reading Clara's journal. The atmosphere here was palpably different, colder, denser, and charged with anticipation. With hammer and chisel in hand, she began to inspect the walls. Every inconsistency in the brickwork, every muffled sound became a beacon. Hours turned into days as Sarah's hands became blistered and sore, but her determination never waned. Mrs. Adler, increasingly worried about Sarah's well-being, paid her a visit, finding her in the basement, surrounded by debris. "Child, some things are better left buried," she warned, her eyes reflecting genuine concern. But Sarah, her face streaked with dust and sweat, responded with a fervor in her eyes. "I need to know, I need to set her free." The line between the past and present began to blur, as Sarah's trauma from her life in Boston intermingled with Clara's desperate pleas. The house, with its echoing memories, consumed her every waking moment. One evening, as a thunderstorm raged outside, Sarah's chisel struck a hollow point in the basement wall. The sound was different, a void behind the brickwork. Fueled by adrenaline, she tore into the wall with newfound vigor. As the bricks crumbled away, they revealed a confined space, and within it, the skeletal remains of a person, seated in a forlorn position. Beside the remains lay a tarnished wedding ring and a decayed letter, preserved over the decades. With trembling hands, Sarah read the letter, Clara's elegant handwriting, recounting a heart-wrenching confession. Contrary to town legend, it was Clara who had asked to be encased within the wall. Overwhelmed by guilt from her affair and unable to face Samuel or the world, she viewed this grim decision as her only penance. She had implored Samuel, in a final act of love, to seal her within their home. As the truth of Clara's fate washed over Sarah, she felt a myriad of emotions: horror, sympathy, and a strange sense of closure. But this closure was short-lived. A shadow loomed at the basement stairs. Turning around, she saw an elderly man, his features eerily resembling those of Samuel from Clara's photographs. Yet he looked as though he had aged only a few years since those times. "I knew someone would find out eventually," he murmured, his voice echoing the weariness of decades. The truth was more horrifying than any ghost story. Samuel, unable to live with the weight of their shared secret, had confined himself to hidden nooks and crannies of the house, becoming a living specter, guarding the chilling truth of their tragic love story. Sarah's mind raced, trying to piece together the impossible scenario unfolding before her. Samuel, with hollowed eyes that told tales of decades in hiding, was a grotesque shadow of the man from Clara's photographs. His gaunt figure and sun-deprived skin painted the image of a life spent in darkness and solitude. Clara was everything, Samuel rasped, his voice choked with emotion. We made a pact. She would forever be a part of this house, and I would remain its keeper. Sarah took a step back, realizing the magnitude of her discovery. Not only had she uncovered the house's tragic secret, but she had also awakened Samuel from his self-imposed exile. As the room's dim light illuminated his face, Sarah saw flashes of pain, anger, and madness. A life of solitude and guilt had turned him into a creature tethered to the shadows, surviving on the fringes of existence. Others have heard her too over the years, he continued, his voice growing more erratic. They've come close, but you uncovered her. Sarah, paralyzed with fear, realized that she was trapped with a man unhinged by time and torment. Every story she had heard about ghosts and spirits paled in comparison to the very real, breathing man who had become a phantom. She remembered the old saying, "And salmon is the cruelest animal." At that moment, surrounded by the remnants of a tragic past and faced with the unpredictable intentions of Samuel, Sarah felt the weight of that statement. The house's secrets were not of the supernatural, but of the depth of human emotion and the lengths one might go to preserve a haunting love story. The thunderstorm outside intensified, mirroring the tension within the basement. Every instinct told Sarah to flee, but Samuel stood between her and the exit. "Please," Sarah whispered, her voice quivering. "I didn't mean any harm. I just wanted to understand." Samuel's gaze drifted to the exposed skeletal remains of Clara. "You've awakened memories best left forgotten," he murmured, tears streaming down his weathered face. Using the storm's next thunderclap as a cover, Sarah lunged for a nearby broken brick, hurling it toward a basement window. The glass shattered, allowing the chilling winds and rain to flood in. The sudden breach distracted Samuel just long enough for her to sprint up the stairs. She didn't look back. Sarah dashed to her car, its engine roaring to life. As she sped away, the silhouette of the house grew smaller in her rearview mirror, but its haunting presence remained, indelibly etched in her memory. Days later, accompanied by local authorities, Sarah returned to the house. There was no trace of Samuel. They scoured the hidden spaces he might have inhabited, but it was as if he had vanished into thin air. Clara's remains were given a proper burial, with the town in attendance paying respects to a long-lost soul. Sarah decided to sell the house, but not before ensuring it was restored, and that Clara's story, though tragic, was honored. A plaque was placed in the study, serving as a reminder of the love, betrayal, and mysteries that once echoed through its walls. Moving on, Sarah often reflected on the real fear she experienced. It wasn't in the echoes or shadows, but in confronting the depths of human emotions and the lengths to which love and guilt could push someone. The house was no longer just a building. It was a testament to the complexities of the human heart. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and turn on notifications. Write which story you liked the most in the comments.